Anyway, religious circles, I just want to give you 2 hints. One is the biotechnology volume of the Vatican, which I helped to edit. And it was a fantastic 1-week conference within the Vatican. And the lowest official we saw was a bishop. The others were all cardinals. And the Pope was too busy. He had no time. Anyway, that's the group with Ingo Potrikos in the middle, the inventor of the golden rice. And we have a declaration in 16 languages, a pro-GMO declaration, coming not from the academy, but from the conference. And beware, not from the Pope. But there is also, in Islamic circles, there are things going on which you don't believe. The Halal Conference, 2010, and the Sharia Compliance Conference, they both cranked out very positive GMO statements. And they are among the highest ranking Islam priests and Muslim officials existing. It's not just a faction somewhere, but that is a real authoritative decision. Now, I'm just finishing. I actually had the task to come with solutions, but I cut that all. Because you, genomics guy, you know so much better, you know. And with every conference contribution, I got a bit smaller and smaller and smaller. I was very much impressed, but instead of getting smaller, I got broader, yeah, because the food is so good. Anyway, but I am impressed by the whole conference and by your knowledge and by the optimism. I said that, I don't want to repeat it. But one thing I want to get over is professional dialogue situations, which I learned from my wife. She's a professional philosopher and has worked with these people. It's the wicked problems we need to solve. It's not just factual knowledge and kind of deficit model preaching and teaching. That will never help in the solution. We need to have a real dialogue and try to understand that, and as much as possible work according to the symmetry of ignorance. Because we know the facts, that's true, and we know often much better, but there are other kinds of knowledge, of real life. There is art, for instance. This is a reality. And we have to take that into account. When you bombard a layperson with facts and facts, he gets indirectly the impression that you want to explain the whole world with facts. And that's just not feasible. So there is factual knowledge, deontic knowledge, that's what corporates usually believe, including Greenpeace. That's what ought to be, you know. And it's okay for me. I gave this talk also with Monsanto, and they laughed first a bit, but then they said, yeah, actually, you're right, Klaus. We think in deontic knowledge. We want to make sure that we have a good product and that it's safe, and so on and so on. I don't want to go into the whole theory. And from Adam Kahane, who was one of the most successful dialogue initiators in South Africa between the black and the white, Adam Kahane. It's very good, the books. Only those should participate who are part of the problem and who are ready for active listening and ready for an open-end debate, which is not closed on a certain target. And that needs courage. And I can tell you that corporates often shy away from the last condition. Yeah, and now comes, of course, part of the solution will be we need another regulatory system, that's clear. We need the one from Canada, as you will see now. Regulation must be revolutionized. That's the inventor of the golden rice, Ingo Botrikos. And it's has come for the scientific community to advance a new generation of international organizations. And that comes from a Harvard professor, Kalestis Chuma. He is a courageous guy. Get rid of the Cartagena Protocol and start something from scratch. Why not? Why not? And I don't want to teach and preach you about the Canadian regulatory system, which is actually product-oriented. It's one of the few in the world, and it works. I have talked to regulators, and I will invite them to European conferences, as EFSA has already done. We need the Canadian product-oriented system. It works, with some flaws, of course, as always, yeah, but it's still much better than our system. I don't want to go into the details here. It's a good graph from Smith and Alan McEwen, both good friends of mine, and I am for Genome Switzerland. Why not? I am really enthusiastic, and I am a Genome fan after this conference. It's clear with my, in the meanwhile, in the decade, collected experience. I think that you do a good job, and you should know that you can spread the word, not just stay here in Canada and think, be happy and so on, but really have a mission also. And spread the word, yeah. And with the big dog, I mean the Cartagena Protocol. The power and promise, I just want to show you another fantastic Japanese idea. To culture algae, nori algae, to put some protein into restructured meat. Another possibility. And it's the unthinkable, my dear friends. And that's a little tiny criticism I have. It's not only the genome. It's much more in biology, as certain speakers have said, but it's the unthinkable, the thing which is absolutely new. And I give you an example. As a young assistant, I had to work, and with lots of swearing, through a dusty moss herbarium, and to fill it into new capsules and to write the new names. So I had to look quite closely sometimes, and I saw that the peristome teeth were still moving, also in samples which were 200 years old. And ever since then, that's now 40 years or even more, I didn't put that out of my head. And now I have an international consortium, and we are looking for money to look into the mechanism, because I know, quite carefully studied, that the mechanism who is working for 200 years is practically unknown. And these modest mosses, they have something we don't even have a slight idea what's going on. And maybe we can make any kind of good machine out of it, or micro-robots or whatever. And then the last thing is a sustainable world. It means a lot of things: agriculture, socioeconomics, technologies. That's my view. And I write an article from the old Brundtland report, which is amazingly progressive, actually. And my slogan is Gene Peace, not Greenpeace. This is clear, and this is an allusion to the coming festivities, season's greetings. It's a real photograph. Unbelievable, huh? It's a documentation about that with a smile from Allah, because last time I showed this slide was in Kuwait. Yeah. Okay, thank you for listening, and thank you again for.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, it was worth waiting for. Thank you, Klaus. So, questions for Klaus? So I have one. So, Klaus, there was a paper by a French group that got a lot of attention a few months, maybe just a couple of months ago. How does someone
the
like...
18th of September it came
out. Oh, you read it?
I read it several times. Yeah.
So I was wondering how somebody like you would respond to...
Well, it's clear that EFSA has, the European Food Safety Agency has yesterday cranked out the definite report, devastating, destroying the paper from A to Z. Repeating from the provisional report quite clearly what is wrong, the statistics is wrong, the way they publish this is wrong. And the biggest irony is that the editor-in-chief, Hayes, from the Chemical Food Toxicology, a renowned Elsevier paper, usually, with exceptions, he published in 2011 a huge review on rat experiments. And without knowing the new paper, he enumerated all the bad mistakes one should not do. So how come that the editor-in-chief of such a good journal can delegate this? And I know now who is the acting editor. It is José Domingo, with his biased reviews and filtered literature lists. Terrible guy, you know, completely against GMOs. He waved this paper just through. A week later, he said it did not raise any red flags. Huh? A paper which is so deeply flawed.
I enjoyed this, but it reminds me of other issues in medicine where you have irrationality by certain groups who are very forceful. I'll give you the anti-vaccine argument, for example.
Oh, yes, from
where as a result of it, you've had populations of young children who previously were not exposed to measles or polio or so on, all of a sudden being afflicted, or having morbidities and dying.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but you have powerful celebrities often on this, and they were associating with autism. We heard yesterday from Steve Scher there are at least up to 200 genes that are linked to this. So that, but they're not interested in the complexity. Another view is relating sometimes to environmental issues. I mean, it's absolutely true that on the oil sands, environmental issues need to be pursued very avidly. On the other hand, when you see the comparison with coal-burning plants in California, which are actually a greater hazard to greenhouse gases, and again should be dealt with, but you got the push of major celebrities behind it, and they get a lot of media attention. But I was struck by a personal experience in Africa a few years ago. I was in Rwanda, and I was taken to a hospital, and you see these young children who have kwashiorkor, where they develop bellies swollen with fluid, and their biliary tree from the liver becomes sclerosed, and they die by the time they're 7 or 8 of liver failure. And the main source of diet is cassava, which is an incomplete protein. And so there's a very clear case where you need modification of the cassava so it again becomes a complete protein. But the country was very leery of getting into this because Europe would not accept their exports. And so these are serious issues. So my question to you actually, Klaus, is it would be important to have incidents like that and to calculate, say particularly for African countries, and I noted the other day about 4 countries, I think led by Kenya, are now going to grow GMO foods. But is there a calculation that said as a result of Africa and certain countries not having GMO food, there was cost in this, especially in the case of infant mortality? I'd be interested to know how Europe would react to that.
Yeah. Well, I have worked in Africa for a certain while in a sorghum project on GMO sorghum, GM sorghum. And the situation is totally different there. The really professional regulators, they are much more open-minded because they are forced to produce the food, you know. It's totally different situation. And I don't want to say that GM food is without risk, but it should be tested as normal with non-GM food the same way. And the way you scrutinize it before you go to costly testing is good. And another thing has to be said, we have now hints that the big seed companies didn't do enough to lower the costs because they had a certain vested interest to keep the regulatory costs as high so that governmental and public institutions were outcompeted for the production. And that's not good. That's the bad idea, you know. And I confronted some of the high-ranking people, and they were, first they mimicked to be baffled, but then they said, yeah, okay, yeah. And when you see how they organize their presence at the Cartagena Protocol, they just keep quiet. They look at it and they are happy how it works. So there are many facets, you know. And in Africa, it's up to now only a big NGO organization, Inter-African organization, which calls for a ban with this Seralini paper. And in India, there is a backlash, and of course in France, as you can imagine. But I think as a whole, Seralini has done us a great service with this bad paper. That's my opinion. And I have 2 weapons in the fight. Pierre knows that. First is humor, but when it gets really serious, then it's mercy. And I have mercy with Seralini. He cannot be taken serious. I have read all his papers, and they're all of the same make, exactly, the same flaws. And I have now a bibliography of over 600 papers with reactions, pro and con, but the negative reactions are overwhelming. It's what the Americans would call bluntly as a shitstorm.
Is there a last question for Klaus before we wind things up? If not, let's thank Klaus again for a very entertaining